This is a modified version of one of the recipes that I demonstrated in my baking schedule video. While the base recipe was great for demonstration purposes, I decided to elaborate on it and create something a little bit more special. What sets this recipe apart from other wheat flour recipes is the addition of fermented rye malt powder. It is usually used in rye bread making, and it is one of my favorite ingredients for that purpose. Rye malt is a dark coffee-like powder with a rich, unique taste and aroma. If you know, you know. There is nothing really like it. And as it turns out, it works miracles in wheat bread too. I would highly suggest you seek it out. But saying all that, you could easily make this recipe without it. So let's get right to it. Let me show you what we'll use today. Starting with the ingredients. We need some white bread flour, whole wheat bread flour, a little bit of whole grain rye flour, some yeast, some salt, water, brown linseeds, caraway seeds, dill seed, which is quite unique, and the fermented rye malt powder. I always get it off eBay. Just search for fermented rye malt powder. It gets sold from various Eastern European countries. It takes ages to arrive, but it's well worth the wait. But like I just said, you can also leave it out. You can swap the seeds in this recipe too and adjust the ratios of flour. Customization is always an option. When it comes to the equipment, we need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, something to slash the loaf with. I'm going to use my razor blade. You can also use a sharp knife. For final proofing, I'll use my little bread basket. It's around 8 inches or 20 centimeters long. This is a medium-sized loaf, so we're using a medium-sized basket. If you don't have a basket, you can line a 2-pound loaf tin with a tea towel. For getting a good bake, a nice rise, crispy crust and nice ears, I'm using my cast iron combo cooker. It bakes the bread evenly on all sides and it keeps the steam trapped in the chamber. This allows the loaf to get a nice oven spring and a beautifully crispy crust. There are of course other methods that you can use for achieving this effect. One of my favorites is the humble water spray bottle. But if you don't own either one of these things, check out my video about steaming in the Principles of Baking playlist for more options. Right, let's begin. It all starts with a soaker/scald. Soaking is a method used for softening seeds, nuts, and grains. Scalding is a method for gelatinizing starches in flour. But the mix that we're making here contains all the seeds, the rye flour, the salt, and the fermented rye malt powder. So it's a combination of a scald and a soaker. We mix these ingredients with boiling water, then we cover up the mix and leave it to cool down completely. You can use all the water of this recipe in this mix, or you could use 2/3 of the water for the scalding and soaking, and then use the remaining water to cool the scald down sooner. I ended up waiting for long enough that the scald cooled down to room temperature anyway, so splitting up the water was pretty pointless in my case, but at least I got to explain the options to you. Okay, to continue making the dough, add the water, the yeast and the whole wheat flour to the soaker. Give it a good mix and then add the final ingredient, the white bread flour. Take your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. And if the scraper is not doing the job, finish it off by hand. This dough will be slightly sticky because of the whole grain rye flour and also because of the moderate hydration of around 75%. But as we work with it, it'll get smoother and more cohesive. Once you have finished mixing the dough, place it in a clean bowl and take its temperature. Around 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit is perfect for this. This is a cold fermented recipe, so straight after mixing it's going in the fridge for 30 minutes of chilling. But because it's also a no-knead recipe, we need to pull it out after 30 minutes and give it one fold. Folding helps with cooling down the dough more evenly, and it develops the gluten structure too. Flatten the dough out, fold it over the middle, go around in a circle to reach point where it started. Once it's nice and tight, place it back into the bowl and pop it in the fridge for around 18 to 24 hours of cold fermentation. And now it's the next day and our dough is puffed up beautifully. This puffy thing is going to turn into a beautiful bread pretty soon. To get that nice double ear effect, we need to create some tension. And since the dough has been sitting in the fridge for so long, it's all relaxed and stretchy. So our next move is to do pre-shaping. Place the dough on the table with the smooth side down, flatten it out, then cross the two sides over the middle. Then fold the top down, turn the dough around, and finally fold the loose end over. Then cover it and leave it to rest for 30 minutes. During the resting stage, the dough will relax once again, but not too much. It will still have some tension, but it will be easy to shape and handle. Now flip it upside down again and flatten it out. Then fold the two top corners over each other in the middle, giving the whole dough kind of a rough triangle shape. Next up, all we need to do is roll it up nice and tight, starting from the top down to the bottom. Once you have finished rolling, you can fold the ends down slightly, and then place the dough in the bread basket with the smooth side down. It is not very sticky at all, so you don't need to worry about flouring the loaf or the basket. Unless your kitchen is extremely humid, it should not stick. Right, let's cover this loaf up and leave it for the final proof. It took me around an hour and a half to 2 hours. You want it to rise until there's a nice little belly in the middle. During the final hour of fermentation, preheat the oven to 220 degrees Celsius, 430 Fahrenheit, fan on, or 240 Celsius, 365 Fahrenheit, fan off. And also preheat your baking vessel if you are using one. Right, it's time to score this bad boy and get it in the oven. I'm going to take my preheated pan out the oven and then invert the loaf onto the bottom part. How you score this loaf is up to you. I decided to give my loaf 2 ears, which is quite a nice look. And it's pretty easy to pull off. Place 2 offset cuts on either side of the loaf, overlapping by about 1/3. If you want a single ear, just slash it from end to end. You can use the razor blade to create all kinds of interesting effects. Give the loaf a checkered pattern, or slash your signature right in the middle of it. The only limit is your creativity. If you have a spray bottle and a pan like this, use them together for an even better effect. Bake the loaf with the lid on for 25 minutes. Then, remove it from the oven, take the lid off, and then place the bread back into the oven for another 10 minutes of baking. The first baking stage is there to make the loaf rise. The second baking stage is there to give it a nice color and a crispy crust. And there you go. That's how you make a beautiful dark wheat flour bread. It is quite the unique thing that we created here. It's a hearty rustic loaf with an incredibly soft interior. Plenty of butter and a thick layer of pate is what the doctor ordered here. This thing is so good. If you have fermented rye malt powder at home, you should definitely give this a go. Or try it out in some other wheat flour recipe. Just remember that it works best when you scald it. Soaking the malt powder in water intensifies the flavor. But that'll be enough about that. I got something else here for you. We are not finished yet. I got so excited about that double slash scoring method, I just had to make another loaf. And if the previous recipe was too complicated for you, this one might be more interesting. It's a 100% white wheat flour loaf. There is no scalding, but the fermentation, folding, pre-shaping, final shaping, scoring, and baking steps are identical to the previous recipe, even down to the timings. The dough was mixed, placed in the fridge for 30 minutes, folded once, placed back into the fridge for 18 to 24 hours of fermentation, then it was taken out on the next day, pre-shaped, left to rest for 30 minutes, then shaped, placed in a basket, left to proof for an hour to an hour and a half, then it was inverted on a hot pan, slashed, sprayed, covered with a lid, baked for 25 minutes, removed from the oven, uncovered, and then placed back into the oven for another 10 minutes of baking. And isn't she beautiful? And that's what I love about bread making. A recipe is just a list of ingredients. It is the method that makes it. The ingredients in these two recipes were very different, but the methods were identical. Decide which one you prefer and have a go. Don't forget to check out some other videos in the cold fermentation playlist. But that'll be all for today. As ever, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.